All right, so today we're jumping into a really cool white paper from 2014. It tackles one of the biggest questions in digital currency. How do you get a network to agree on things without the massive energy-guzzling process of mining? It's a fascinating approach, so let's get right into it.
And really, this is the fundamental question, right? In our day-to-day lives, we have banks to act as the trusted middleman. But when you go digital and decentralized, who do you trust? Well, the entire challenge, the whole thing really boils down to solving one very specific, very nasty problem. And here is our main villain, the double spend problem. Just think about it. You try to spend the same digital dollar in two different places at the exact same time. If a system can't prevent that, well, the whole thing just falls apart. Digital money simply can't work. It's the one thing you absolutely have to solve. Okay, so to really get our heads around this trust issue, the paper brings up a classic thought experiment. It's actually an old problem, but it perfectly explains this very modern challenge. So picture this. You've got these generals surrounding a city. They all have to agree on the exact moment to attack to be successful. The only way they can communicate is by sending messengers. But, and this is the big but, what if some of those generals are traitors? They could send fake messages, lie about the attack time, and just totally sabotage the whole plan. Now just swap out generals for servers on a network and traitors for hackers or even just faulty computers. It's the exact same problem. So, how do you beat these digital traitors? How do you solve this whole mess? Well, the paper lays it out pretty clearly. It says any system that wants to succeed has to nail three specific goals, no exceptions. First, you need correctness. This is basically the system's built-in nonsense detector. It has to be able to look at a transaction and immediately say, nope, that's fake. Maybe something isn't signed right or someone's trying to magically create money out of thin air. It just gets rejected right out of the gate. All right, next up is agreement. And this one is absolutely critical. Every honest participant on the network has to be looking at the exact same ledger, the same single version of the truth. You can't have half the network thinking you spent your money here and the other half thinking you spent it over there. That's chaos. And this is the goal that directly crushes that double spend problem. And last but not least, utility. I mean, look, a system can be the most secure, perfect thing in the world, but if it takes 3 days to buy a cup of coffee, it's useless, right? Nobody's going to use that. So when we talk about utility for a payment network, we're really just talking about one thing. It has to be fast. Okay, so we have our three goals: correctness, agreement, and utility. Now, how does Ripple propose to achieve all this? This is where their big idea comes in, and it's a totally different way of thinking. It's not about asking the whole world to vote. It's about something called a unique node list. So, what in the world is a UNL? Think of it this way. Instead of trying to get consensus from millions of anonymous computers you know nothing about, each server on the network chooses its own little curated list of trusted peers. It's like your personal board of directors. You're not asking the whole world for an opinion. You're just asking the specific validators you've already decided to trust. Okay, so you've got your trusted list, your UNL. How does that group actually come to an agreement on what's true? Well, the process happens in these super quick, iterative rounds. It all works kind of like a funnel, and it's really fast. First, all the servers just broadcast the new transactions they've seen. Then, they look at what the servers on their trusted list are proposing, and they vote on everything. A yes on this one, a no on that one. Only the transactions that get a certain number of yes votes make it to the next round. This repeats until, bam, a transaction gets a massive majority of yes votes, and that's when it's locked in for good. And that massive majority? The magic number is 80%. That's the threshold. A transaction needs to get an 80% yes vote from the servers on a UNL to be considered final. That's the supermajority that says, okay, this is now a fact. It's part of the official history. But wait a second. This brings up a huge question, right? If I have my trusted list and you have your trusted list, what's to stop my group from agreeing on transaction A while your group agrees on a totally conflicting transaction B? Couldn't they both hit that 80% mark within their own little circles? That exact scenario is called a fork, and it would be a complete disaster. It would totally violate our agreement goal because you'd suddenly have two different versions of the ledger, two competing histories. The whole system would just break. And here's the elegant solution: overlap. The system is designed so that for it to be secure, your trusted list has to have members in common with my trusted list, and so on. As long as our UNLs overlap enough, it becomes mathematically impossible for two conflicting transactions to both get 80% approval. That overlap is the secret sauce. It's the safety mechanism that prevents the network from splitting in two.
All right, so let's tie this all together. We've seen how the UNL and the voting works. But does it actually deliver on those three goals we talked about at the beginning?
You bet it does. For correctness, you're good as long as less than 20% of your trusted list is acting shady. For agreement, that's guaranteed by making sure the UNLs have enough overlap. But the real game changer here is utility. Because you're only talking to a small, trusted group, you're not waiting for the whole planet to do complex math. This means transactions get confirmed in just a few seconds. That's incredibly fast.
And this really highlights the design philosophy here. If you look at something like Bitcoin's proof of work, it can technically handle a higher percentage of bad guys trying to attack the network. But Ripple's approach makes a very deliberate trade-off. It says, we'll accept a slightly lower fault tolerance, but in exchange, we're going to give you mind-blowing speed and super low costs. We're talking seconds versus minutes or even hours. Which brings us to a really interesting final thought. Is trust something that should be calculated through brute force, anonymous computation, or is it better when it's chosen, when it's curated? This model hinges on the idea of explicitly picking who you trust. So what's better? A system built on anonymous math or one built on intentional, diversified trust? It's a huge philosophical question that's still being debated today.